This podcast is brought to you by Live Intent. Life happens. Email subscribers go on vacation, aren't buying swimsuits in the winter, or maybe they just look like they're not opening your emails because of MPP. Find the subscribers that look dormant but are ready to re-engage with you by leveraging Live Intent's email intelligence. Reactivated subscribers are 26% more likely to make a purchase than non-subscribers. Let us pinpoint which subscribers on your inactive list are most likely to engage and then assist you in crafting retargeting campaigns to reach them. Visit liveintent.com/subs to get started. That's liveintent.com/SUBS. Welcome to the Marketecture Podcast. I'm Ari Paparo. I am joined by Eric Franchi.
Hey, everybody.
And our special guest today is David Cohen, the CEO of the IAB. David, thank you for being here.
It is my pleasure.
So we have an amazing week of news, not all good, but just chock full of news, never a quiet week. I'd also recommend that you go to the Marketecture newsletter and read the last two issues in which I did some original analysis. I created a thing called the SLOP ranking, which somebody told me it's SLOP stands for, what does it stand for? Yeah. So scale, loyalty, and performance. And then someone said, why don't you just call it plus? And I was like, oh, man, I missed that one. Could have been plus instead of slop. But anyway, we're calling it slop, and it's making some waves. People find it interesting, or they hate me, or, the usual. So news.marketecture.tv, you should subscribe. All right. With that said, let's dive in. So, David, you and I just spent the last 2 days together. We were at the IAB Tech Lab's 10-year anniversary, which is an amazing event.
Yes, it was awesome.
Those folks over there, the Tech Lab, they're busy, right? They're doing stuff. They come up with new standards. They're having working meetings. They're like a whole operation there.
You're absolutely right. And I believe you had something to do with the inception and the creation of the Tech Lab. So you were prescient back in the day. And I do think when I took the job here, one of the things that resonated really strongly with me, anyone can stand on stage and talk crap about what they want to do for the industry, but to actually have a sister organization or related brother or sister that can actually implement global technical standards to do something about it was incredibly appealing. So it's not only sourcing the business requirements, but actually developing global technical standards. And Tech Lab, as you well know, and the audience probably well knows, is behind many of the things that are kind of the underpinnings of the kind of global digital economy. So it's been a great 10-year run, and it's probably never been as relevant as it is today.
Yeah, it's been really thriving under Tony Katzer's leadership. And also, I think everyone just loves the staff. The people he's hired and his predecessors hired are just really stand-up folks that are really great to work with. So I think it was a big love fest for the last couple of days.
Yes, and one of the things that Tony said, I think on stage, and one of the things that I sometimes feel, being in these roles, either at the Tech Lab or at IAB proper, is a thankless job. One of the pieces of advice that Randall gave me when I joined is you're not going to please everyone all the time. So you're invariably going to be pissing someone off in what you're doing. And I think that, you just have to soldier on. We're here for the betterment of the industry, not for or against any individual member. And I think that's the kind of guiding principle.
That's a good lead into my first general question, which is, what are the IAB's priorities moving forward?
Yeah, so we do annual planning. So we had dabbled in the thought of doing like a 2 or 3 year plan. But then you think about things like generative AI, which 18 months ago wasn't a thing, and now it is the thing. And you kind of wonder, is this a fool's errand? Do you kind of look so far into the future that you can't kind of accurately predict? We are trying to get to a better balance, though, of what is that immediate term versus long-term planning. So just know that. At its core, IAB, and you know very well that our goal is to grow the digital media and marketing economy responsibly. And we've done that for 2 decades, double-digit growth year on year on year. And while we are certainly not perfect and the industry has things to do, I think that the growth trajectory has been nothing short of astounding. So our goal is to reduce the friction between buyers and sellers. Our goal is to be kind of the central convening place for, we call it the big tent, for brands, agencies, ad tech platforms, and publishers we do lots and lots of things. As you know, we are looking for national privacy reform, national comprehensive privacy reform to kind of regulate our industry in a systematic way, as opposed to kind of the onesie twosie or 20E that we have, 20 states or so that have national privacy laws. We want to provide tools for the ecosystem to be compliant with the law. We want to help the streaming environment grow and thrive. We want to set standards. We want to issue best practices. We want to encourage the growth of up and coming technologies, AR, VR, gaming, and of course, AI. So our problem, honestly, Ari, is not that we've got so much that we can do. It's our problem is what should we not do? So every year, our greatest challenge is what do we slough off? What can we give up as we continue to add things to the pile? And I will tell you, since I've been here 4 years, we have given up basically nothing. So we continue to add year on year, and we don't stop doing anything. And obviously, we can't add unlimited resources, so it's an ongoing challenge. What do we stop doing?
Just for the sake of measurement, like how many employees does the IAB have? What's the budget?
So 82 employees, $33 million in revenue. That's during the pandemic that took a little bit of dip, and obviously now it's back up to pre-pandemic levels. But that's just the scale of the business.
It's helpful data points just so people get a sense of what you're up to. So if I have a question just in general, if you go back in time to say the 2005 when I started in the industry, the perception of the IAB was that it was a publisher advocacy organization. The West Coast types, like the Googles of the world, were interlopers or adversaries of some kind. But nowadays, it seems like a big tent. You have TikTok coming to your meetings and things like that. So is that a proper perception? And who do you currently represent?
That's a great question, and I love it because I get it all the time. When I joined IAB, I heard two things. Well, one thing was written in Ad Exchanger, so I read it as opposed to heard it. But it was kind of like IAB has lost its way was the title of the headline, which is kind of like you can't be an inch deep and a mile wide and representing all of the needs of the industry. It's impossible. So while IAB was founded as a publisher organization, now it's kind of representing everyone. So you can't be everything to all people. So that's number one. And then number two, which is my fan favorite, is you're in the pocket of Google and Facebook, and they basically dictate what you do. So those are the two things that I was going into the job with. The thing that's obviously, while we do represent Google and Facebook and Amazon and TikTok and others, when you look at kind of the commercial component of that relationship, if you look at the top three internet players and what it represents to IAB's revenue, you'd be shocked at how small it is. So we have 720 members. So we've got the big, the small, the medium size. We've got agencies. We've got brands. Over time, we have added on kind of components to the organization. Our belief, and this is not a right or wrong thing, people could say this is bullshit, this doesn't make any sense, is that other organizations which are focused on a vertical kind of area of expertise, I represent agencies, I represent brands, I represent kind of I've heard those called as warrior organizations. We don't believe it's an us versus them. We don't believe buyer versus seller is a good construct. We believe having everyone in the room at the same time talking about the industry issues and helping solve them is a more constructive way of doing that. There's a double-edged sword to that. Getting consensus among all of these constituents is incredibly difficult. One of the things that I underestimated when I took the job was the nuance of that and the politics of that. I do think, I'm not patting my own back, but I do think that we have done a reasonably good job throughout the years to advocate for things that we all can believe in. So I think we probably should talk about privacy and national reform and what that looks like. But we have consensus across our kind of individual constituents at a foundational level that we're all trying to do the same thing, which I think is good.
One divergence in interest that seems to be happening a lot is this concept of open web and journalism, more traditional publishers versus aggregators like Google and Meta, who may direct traffic to those journalists, and there are some efforts to make them pay for linking out. That's just one example of where their interests conflict. So how are you navigating that divide? Or do you think it is a divide?
Well, if you look at the news ecosystem, so I joined right when COVID happened. I was in the office a day and then we shut down. So lucky me. So when COVID happened, the same thing happened in the news organizations. No one wanted to be associated or adjacent to stories of death and dying, death counts, and outdoor morgue. So people pulled all their advertising from news, and news was being starved. We were hearing from our news publishers that this is a terrible situation. We need your help. So we started a campaign, a political campaign that we called News Saves Lives. And it was had many components to it. There was a research component to it, because there's two sides to the kind of news argument. There's one which is, if you want a democracy to exist, you need to support responsible news organizations, which I think it does resonate, but it doesn't necessarily resonate in the pocketbook. Or does this actually make the cash register ring? Does association with high quality news drive your business forward? So we did a lot of research and we showed, yes, in fact, it does. So that was super successful. Over time, news has not, it's a tough time to be a news publisher, tough time to be in the open web, period, full stop. And we've tried to do lots of things to encourage. Our goal is to make the overall ecosystem thrive. So we have a publisher council, which meets on a regular basis to talk about issues that, platforms are not invited to the publisher council. What are the things that we could be doing together to make that work? As AI became to rear its head, we heard from publishers, holy crap, this is bad on so many levels. They're taking our copyrighted content. No one's ever going to have to go to my website. You must help us be an intermediary in conversations with Google, with Microsoft, with OpenAI. And we have done that. Have we solved all the world's ills? No, we haven't. But while many people think that we are only here to support the large platforms, nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah, Eric, I'm going to put you on the spot. Did you see the Perplexity thing with the Schmidt interview that came out this week? You're a big AI guy.
I didn't know. What? Give me the summary.
The summary is that Perplexity, which is a next generation search engine based on AI, they introduced a new product that I think they call it Pages, where they instead of searching, they summarize a topic in a page. And in this case, they had summarized this topic about Eric Schmidt and him investing in military weapons that was entirely based on a single article from Vox. And so, in effect, they had a page that summarized the article from Vox that's behind a paywall. And sure, they attributed it to them at the end. There's a little link at the bottom. But effectively, it looks to the outside world like wholesale plagiarism based on AI.
Either wholesale plagiarism at worst. At best, it's a summary minus the 728 by 90s and 300 by 250s and in-stream video ads that Vox otherwise would have served. So on both levels, doesn't seem good. But no, I haven't seen it. I'll check it out.
Did you see that?
I didn't see that. No,
it's interesting because it just puts in stark contrast the worst case scenario where you have a single article that breaks news and it gets reproduced outside of a paywall. Let's talk policy. So a lot of talk about privacy. I kind of want to ask you, just if you were a responsible legislator or I guess as an advocate, what is the ideal privacy law that the U.S. should pass?
Yeah, I mean, I will start by saying one of the most interesting parts of my job, because as an agency guy for 25 years, I did lots of things. I had lots of clients who I was the client to lots of my members currently. So the kind of roles have switched. But what I didn't have a lot of exposure to was public policy and legislation and how that process worked. I mean, at the agency, when we had to deal with something when GDPR happened or CCPA happened, we dealt with it, but we were never kind of along the way for the ride. And it's been fascinating, eye-opening, and not necessarily all in a positive way, as you can imagine. We spent 2 days last week. I'll get to your question. I'm going to be a politician and answer the question as I like it to be answered. We spent two days last week in D.C. We took our board. We take our board there every year, and we met with a variety, 6 congressmen and women, to talk about basically data privacy. We talked a little about AI, Section 230, and I will tell you that I've been doing this now for 4 years. And the thing that I was happy to hear is that we're actually starting as an industry, and not just IAB, others are lobbying on the Hill. Folks are parroting back or saying back some of the things that we have said to them. We have been on a widespread educational tour so that in the quest to punish big tech, you don't decimate the open web, the small players, the publishers. Because I think that, with the wide swath, you can. And I think that many of these large companies will do just fine. Thank you very much. But compliance costs for 17 to 20 states for a small mom and pop or a small publisher will be game over. And that's kind of a thing that I think we've been saying over and over again. We also met with Ben Buchanan, who's a special advisor to the White House on AI, which was fascinating. He helped author the executive order on AI, but we can come back to that. So if I was waving my wand and creating a national privacy law, I would have full state preemption. So we had ADPPA, which had some traction a couple of years ago. We have APRA, which is now pretty much going nowhere. All of this, every bill is about compromise. And when you overcompromise, it's kind of like, why are we doing this anyway? So the idea is we need to preempt. We need a national law that preempts all the state laws. So yesterday we had Ashkan from California who came to speak at the IAB Tech Lab. And obviously, California has done a lot of work in this space, and they're not necessarily on the train of national preemption. But I do think that if we're going to have individual states that would be carve outs, how does that help us with a kind of national law? So that's number one. Number two is a private right of action, which gives individual consumers the ability to sue, helps the plaintiff's bar, helps lawyers, helps a lot of people make a lot of money, but doesn't help the free and open internet thrive. So we would not include that.
I'm sorry. I was just going to point out the nightmare scenario as a former CEO of a DSP is where I could get sued by anyone with a lawyer in the Southern District of Texas for some violation that's impossible to prove or disprove. I mean, I can't imagine a private right of action being feasible.
Yeah, totally. So we're aligned there. There'd be an enforcement agency. So obviously, could be the FTC, could be a new agency. There'd be a reasonable effective date, so you'd have some time to prepare. And I think that the last part is kind of like it's a two-parter. What is sensitive data? In APRA's original drafting, any browsing behavior was sensitive data, and that's kind of crazy, right? So you need to have things that make sense. Use of first-party data, contextual, responsible use of third-party data. So basically, start with the place that third-party data is not, the Antichrist to begin with, and kind of just have some kind of reasonable. It has to work for legislators, it has to work for consumers, and it has to work for industry. And I think the balance of those three have been challenging.
You didn't say anything about consent. So what would the consent is kind of the bridge on which GDPR is built.
You're right. I didn't, and I should have. So consent has to be given in reasonable, easy to read, easy to understand English. One of the things that I struggle with, and we did a piece of research about 6 months ago, we went out to the consumers, because what we hear all the time is that consumers don't want this to happen. They don't want to be tracked. They feel uncomfortable. And I'm sure that that is true. But to what extent, I guess, is the question. So we asked 1,000 consumers their wants and needs and likes and dislikes as it relates to their data. Consumers, by and large, don't want to have their identity stolen. They don't want their bank account to be compromised. They don't want people to open credit cards in their name. But in terms of ad targeting, their data being used for ad targeting, there were 1% of consumers who found that offensive. So I think that we just need to be reasonable and realistic. Kind of when we say consumers are against the usage of their data, there certainly are, and we need to be responsible in our use of that. But I think they're worried about far more other things than necessarily how it relates to permissible purposes like advertising.
So one divide in your coalition is when it comes to drafting some of these laws, the distinguishing between first-party and third-party data. Because to overcharacterize it, I would say open web people rely on third-party data, meaning an ad server or somebody like that, whereas Google has first-party data everywhere. But does the IAB have an opinion on that distinction, and has that come up as an issue?
It has, and it's a. We heard about it at the summit. Invariably, when you think about laws like this, you need to think about the folks who are the holders of most of the first-party data in the ecosystem, and if you're going to kind of reduce the ability to use third-party data, which is collected with consumer consent, then you're going to be penalizing or punishing all the kind of small and mid-sized players. So we want reasonable, permissible purposes. We want consumers to have the ability to opt out in clear, transparent English, but we want to be able to use third-party data if consumers are okay with it. And we have to make sure that we've talked about doing a consumer campaign as an example to understand the value trade-offs, because all of this is a value equation. You're going to be giving the use of your data for an experience that is tailored and personalized to you, but is supporting the growth of publishers and news organizations and the wide open web. If we have most consumers who choose to not do that, the economics of what we've built over the past 30 years will be entirely turned upside down.
Is there a partisan divide on these issues, or it seems kind of random?
Well, there's a partisan divide on everything. There's very little that is agreed across the aisle. Historically, Republicans have been more business friendly than Democrats. But I just think if Democrats want one thing, Republicans will disagree because Democrats want it. It's certainly in a presidential year. So the goal now is to not give up any land. It's not to give a win to any other side. And it's kind of that's more of the issue this year, which is why APRA will, unless there's something that's miraculous that happens, will not move anywhere. And we will pick this up with the next Congress next year.
Last question. Are you enjoying yourself? Is this a good job? Would you recommend it when you eventually step down to someone else?
Just like every other job, most days I really enjoy the gig, and some days are less good than others. During COVID, which is 2 years of my 4 that I've been here, is really when a trade association shows the value to the industry. We had no idea as a species, let alone as an industry, how we're going to get through what it is that we were getting through. So we would be the kind of grand convener. We'd have all of these CRO council, agency council, brand council, publisher council getting together. Park your competitive spirits at the door. How are we going to get through this crap, guys? I mean, what are we going to do? What are you hearing? What are you hearing? It was, not to use Apple-ism, it was magical. It was really, really great. And I think we've continued that post-pandemic. So it really has challenged me in ways that the agency business didn't challenge me. It's a crazy job. I have never worked harder in my life. I could meet with members in the morning. I could pen a thought leadership piece. I could go over research. Operationally running the business of an 82-person, $33 million business is another part of the job. So it's a good gig. Will I do it forever? I don't know. I will do it for some time more. Randall did it for 15 years. God bless him. I'm not sure if that's in the cards. We'll see. I'm enjoying it at the moment.
Sounds good. We have to have Randall on the show at some point. All right, let's take a quick break. Huge news week in ad tech, so we have a lot to talk about. We'll be back.
This podcast is sponsored by Adelaide. You've probably heard of Adelaide by now. This month, they announced a new product, Adelaide for Publishers. For the first time, publishers can leverage attention metrics to curate inventory, deliver attention insights, and drive higher CPMs. Join the Weather Company, NPR, Westwood One, Cumulus Media, and other leading publishers taking advantage of the attention economy's most popular metric, AU. Maybe one day Mark will convince me to sell guaranteed AU slots on Marketecture, but probably not. Check out AdelaideMetrics.com/AFP for more information.
And we're back. As Ari said, it was a big news week. And we'll probably start from the top down with what was the most earth-shattering from an ad tech X community perspective. The surprise exiting of the advertising business from Oracle. So a couple days ago, Oracle had its fiscal Q4 announcement, and there was a specific line from the call. It said this: in Q4, we decided to exit the advertising business, which had declined to about $300 million revenue in fiscal year 24. This was just like something that was dropped in the middle of the earnings call. They didn't make a formal announcement that they were exiting the advertising business prior. Apparently, once this took off on X and the trades got a hold of it, Oracle advertising business employees found out about it. Sounds like this was like a really bad way to do this and an unfortunate outcome. So, Ari, you as usual had like a super sharp take on this, and I'll read it. Basically, it's this: the software side of the business was dead. Moat didn't keep up with competitors. Blue Kai, very cookie dependent, and Grapeshot was the hidden gem, which I think largely tracks. You had another response, I think, to David Jacobs, which was effectively like the answer to why the marketing clouds don't seem to be continuing with their focus on advertising, which is if you want to build $1 billion advertising business, you need to get into the transaction. You're either buying or selling ads, which I think is right on, and I think also shows who the next strategic sort of like set of large companies in the space is. Further thoughts on this?
So just the history here, Blue Kai was sort of a half software, half data marketplace. And the software business was
Right.
very cookie dependent and effectively died a couple of years ago. I think they even said publicly they weren't even selling Blue Sky to new customers. I think that ad tech is hard and you have to continue to invest. It's not a kind of software business like an email service provider where you have a certain ARR and it just recurs and you don't really have to do too much to keep it going. Ad tech changes all the time. It's very dynamic. And unless you're very serious about it, you're going to probably have a deprecating asset. I thought the reporting from Business Insider that this used to be a $2 billion business and now it's 300.
That's what they said.
Shocking. I've also got some texts from people that said that the employees still haven't actually been officially told that they don't have severances. They don't know when they're out. I don't know if that's true, but someone texted me that about an hour ago, which is not great. And I think if you zoom out, right, the three kind of what I'd call cloud providers who've invested in ad tech are Salesforce, Oracle, and Adobe. Nothing to write home about across the board. Adobe's still in the business. They still have the DSP. It used to be TubeMogul. They have a DMP, which I think might be healthy, but it's not a very strategic, important part of the business, I don't think. We've asked Denise Colella, who is the head of strategy there, to come on the pod. So, Denise, if you're listening, you can defend yourself. And I think that, I'll stand by what I said on Twitter, which is if you want to make billions of dollars in advertising, you either have to buy ads or sell ads. It's simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's going to be a lot more of the sellers than the buyers. David, so those three names, Oracle, Salesforce, Adobe, are they still like active IAB participants, members?
Yes, they are, generally. One of the things that has been an adjustment for me, that's the answer to your question, but one of the things I was very, very big on when I was on the agency side is I would talk openly and freely on behalf of my clients on any kind of company doing good or bad in the industry. As a trade association, you don't do that. So we don't talk about any individual company positively or negative. We always just kind of try to operate at a 60,000 foot level. But yes, they are all engaged and active.
Got it. We'll see what happens when it's time for renewal season, I guess.
Good luck on the Oracle renewal.
All right, moving on. One more, I guess, interesting note on the verification front. All right, you found this. DV is going to be verifying Reddit, which is, I think, interesting. So, I guess Reddit isn't using any verification providers. So this is a first for Reddit. And then B, Reddit is like extremely brand unsafe across like a whole swath of all of these subreddits. It's just the nature of the thing. So I think this is a very positive step for Reddit to, start to, work with a DV because, obviously the future of Reddit is going to be advertising. So giving, not just like the little sort of SMBs that seem to be the big advertisers today, but, brands who are concerned about brand safety and targeting and all of that stuff, the ability to have a new scale platform.
Yeah, I think they have a lot of ambitions around advertising. And obviously the first question any advertiser is going to ask about Reddit is, where is this ad showing? So good for them. It makes sense to do a deal like this. I imagine this deal is like the other what we call walled garden deals, where it's a feed from Reddit that DV verifies. I can't imagine that they're on the page reading all the content. That makes a big difference in terms of how much you can believe in it, as per that little controversy with DV giving X a 99% positive score that happened a couple months ago. So I think that's one thing advertisers should be asking.
Okay, so just explain that a little bit more, which means that they won't necessarily guarantee brand safety in a real-time context, because that's very, very hard to do on X and Reddit, because there's like millions of posts happening per minute. Is that basically the sort of gist of it?
When you're on the open web, I'm using the terms I don't like, but when you're on the open web, DV has an actual tag on the page and has JavaScript that could do whatever it does to stand behind their classification as something is safe or non-safe. When you're in Meta or YouTube or now Reddit or X, the way it works is that the media property sends a feed of the proximity of the ad next to content, the adjacency, and then the verifier can really only verify what they're given. In the case of the X controversy, what everyone pretty much said was that when DV gave them a 99% brand safe score, it was because they only saw the directly adjacent tweets above and below. They didn't see things like whether the person who tweeted it was a Nazi or whether it was down in the comments where there was pornography and things like that. So the adjacency kind of limits the effectiveness of the measurement.
Got it. Thank you. That was super clear. David, some of the vertical organizations you spoke about earlier, right? So, the ones that are focused on serving, just the agencies, just the brands, all things brand safety, suitability, supply chain seems to be like the top of the list, and maybe top 1, 2, and 3 from those organizations' perspective. Is it the same on the IAB side in terms of just like focus and coming up with solutions and all of that?
Yeah. So we do an annual member survey, which we just fielded. So we're getting the results now, and we ask, how are we doing just in general? How is IAB performing? What could we be doing better? What are the areas that are most interesting to you or important to you? Every year, and I imagine it will not change this year, cross-media measurement and attribution is the top of the list. So while I maybe didn't mention that in the beginning of our conversation, it is an area of focus for us, and we're trying to not duplicate what is going on in other parts of the business, but be additive. We're focusing on attention as an area for kind of some standards and guidelines. What is attention anyway? What are the kind of, I think Jonah yesterday was talking about that as it relates to his new company. There's a lot of work to be done around kind of everything from cross-channel reach and frequency to measuring business outcomes. There's a lot of steps in between, and can we make our industry better along the way? So that's always one. Brand safety and suitability and trust is usually a top 3. So whether it's supply chain opacity or transparency, which obviously Tech Lab does a whole lot in that area, it's probably another top request from our members to focus on. I imagine it will be this year as well. Sustainability has been one that has been kind of increasing year on year, still not at the top of the list, but definitely something that we're keeping our eye on. So yes, I think brand safety and measurement are usually number 1 and number 2. I'd expect that to be true for this year
Quick
too.
call out. Jonah Goodhart gave a TED Talk worthy presentation at the IAB Tech Lab event. People were just rapt. No one was checking their phones for like 20 minutes while he did his overview of the state of measurement. It's really worth seeing if you see him.
I think it was 200 slides in 20 minutes or something. It was like unbelievable. Didn't take a breath, rapt attention. You didn't have a chance to take out your phone and take a picture because it was 3 slides down already. It was really good.
Is that posted publicly somewhere for everyone, David?
I don't think so. But
I'll reach out to him to ask him if he's okay with it being in the show notes. My guess is no, because they're still sort of under wraps what they're up to.
Got it. All right. Well, I wish I was there. Anyway, moving on. Okay. So 2 interesting M&A transactions this week. We should talk about them briefly and maybe talk about what this means after. So first was MadHive acquired Frequence. So MadHive is, kind of a TV focused DSP. And then Frequence is, it's like a marketing platform with dashboard capabilities for sales and reporting and insights. So it sounds like there's a couple of things here, not a lot of overlap and, a lot of, sort of synergies of putting these things together and making a 1 + 1 equals 2. The one thing that I think was interesting to call out with this, which we'll talk about with the next one, is these are now big businesses. So MadHive plus Frequence equals 600 employees. And again, they didn't talk about any sort of kind of the wrong kind of synergies when you talk about M&A. The other deal was Equitive merged with ShareThrough. They position it as a merger. I think Equitive is far larger than ShareThrough, but Ari, you can let me know if I'm wrong there. Similarly, it's a connecting 2 companies that don't have a lot of overlap. So the other thing was, they talked about how the combined entity now has over 700 employees, 18 countries, net recurring revenue over 200 million. So, take a step back. It seems like, this is the long-awaited consolidation across, the sort of category is A, and B, companies are trying to get big because the only way to have, I think, a big outcome in terms of IPO or scaled P&E is you need to have a big business. So that's the sort of tea leaves that I'm reading. What do you think, Art?
Yeah, sure. So first, private-to-private transactions, usually rare, or with no IPO window, that becomes really attractive. So MadHive Frequence first. So MadHive, it's very important to realize who their customers are. MadHive is a DSP, but they pretty much only sell to media companies. They allow a media company to do audience extension and audience-based buying through a DSP-like console. And the reason they do that is because many of these media companies have declining audience on linear, and they need to make it up. They were a direct competitor to Beeswax. We did this for Comcast. We did this for other companies as well. So I know them very well. So my guess is that this is another tool they can now offer the sales force of media companies to better build IOs and plans for their customers. So if you're a sales manager in a regional cable company, you're selling to a local business, a car dealership, whatever, you can now do some aspect of planning and reporting that goes across linear, what they buy through their DSP and other channels. That's what I think this is, but I'm not very familiar with Frequenz. That's my guess about what they're doing. The other deal, Equitive Share-Through, is just a consolidation play. Equitive, very strong in Europe. They used to be known as Smart Ad Server, if you forgot. Share-Through, very big in the US. Share-Through is also very strong with native, which is a unique capability that is hard to build yourself. They're probably the number 2 native exchange after TripleLift. And what I'll do is, right after we record this, I'll make both the Equitive and the Share-Through interviews on Marketecture.tv free with registration, so you don't need to pay. You can watch those interviews. I just did the Equitive one with their new head of North America just like about 2 months ago, so it's pretty fresh. Should be interesting. You can get a sense of what they're up to.
Thanks for doing that. David, when you don't have too many of these, but there might be more coming. When an IAB member company merges or acquires another IAB member company, what are the implications for like your team at the IAB?
Such an interesting question. We have one less member, I think is the short answer. This has been a really kind of, it's accelerated over the past couple of years. This has been
that's why I ask.
A real thing. It's being kind of offset though by parts of the business that are growing by leaps and bounds. So, which we haven't talked about yet. So shame on the collective us, but the renaissance in retail media, in commerce. I mean, we have so many new members in that area, both whether you're a retailer now getting into the media business or you're kind of one of the folks that are enabling that to happen. We've added, I think, north of 50 members this year, many of them in the retail sector. So yeah, consolidation is not necessarily a net good thing for us and our membership, but we're growing in areas of like AI and retail media in a significant way.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, right? So AI, CTV, retail media, privacy, you're probably way offsetting, any potential M&A with just like all of these industries that are just booming with new companies.
Well, there is also a changing of the guard. There is also, a lot of companies have gone through their maturation cycle and they're not doing either as well as they had been. So, and there's a whole bunch of new companies that are coming in to replace them. So yeah, I think it's a net positive at the end of the day, but definitely a lot of cycling. If you look at our membership, our board, it has been quite dynamic in the past 2 years. Lots of movement, as I know we've all been seeing.
This is fascinating stuff. All right, so let's talk about those categories. Let's go with CTV. So 2 sort of interesting announcements this week. The first was Scripps is, I think, the first CTV publisher to adopt TTD's OpenPass, which is a single sign-on product that enhances user authentication and increases the number of UID2s for better audience targeting. I didn't look too much into the materials on this, but like in practice, does this mean that before watching some sort of content on CTV by Scripps, you need to sign up for and log in with OpenPass? Is that basically the gist here?
Whether you have to or is just suggested is kind of up to Scripps. I actually coincidentally met the product manager at the trade desk who runs this at the IAB event, and I asked him about it. It's pretty. OpenPass is like a secret weapon. They don't really talk about that much. So what they're doing is they have tools to allow publishers to collect email addresses. So they prompt the user for an email. In this case, it's email or QR code. And you hit the QR code, your phone pops up, you type in your email. It does an email verification. So, everyone's probably gotten that where you get an email saying, is this really you? And then boom, you're in. Scripps gets the email into their data warehouse. They can do whatever they want with it. They have the email associated with that account, whatever. It's totally up to Scripps what level of access they give based on that email. They could ask for a password or not, ask for a credit card or not. And the trade desk actually does not get any data. They don't have any data rights in that whole transaction unless Scripps wants them to through UID2. So it's very elegant, taking what probably there are lots of vendors who do single sign-on and do this sort of stuff. Google, if you do single sign-on, takes like 5 steps. You have to open an app on your phone and verify and all that. This is just super easy. I love this strategic move for the Trade Desk. And they really are under the radar on this, I think, to a great extent.
Okay, cool. Keep an eye on it. The other thing from this week in the CTV front, Roku launched an exchange. It's aptly named the Roku Exchange. So this seems to be another first. So they're basically like connecting their ad inventory with advertiser demand across Magnite's SSP and then various DSPs. So what's interesting here, and I would love your take, David, you too, the future of CTV seems to be walled gardens. And Roku, with this new direction, seems to be taking a different direction. Is that the way to think about this?
I don't know, man. I read this press release. I couldn't figure out what was going on. They sent it to me, and I responded to the PR people like, hey, how's this different from what Roku did like last week? And they said, well, now it's an exchange. I'm kind of drawing blanks on figuring out how this is different because they're still using Magnite as their intermediary, and they've been selling ads through exchanges for a long time. I know it's different somehow, but I'm unable to grasp exactly why.
I saw the same, and I have not had a chance, given Tech Lab Summit for the past 2 days, to kind of reach out to them, but I'm curious as to what exactly that is as well. I don't think it's outlandish to say that CTV is a bunch of kind of walled gardens, hedge gardens, whatever you want to call them. That seems to be kind of the proliferation. But one of the things that we're keeping a track on is kind of how much of the CTV ecosystem is being bought via automation of some kind, programmatically or via direct IO. And it's been very, very clear. We're just about to release some research that we fielded that programmatic is really growing by leaps and bounds. For years, it was primarily kind of direct IO. And now it's kind of, most people would cite 50, 75% plus as being bought programmatically, which is actually quite a material change.
Innovate and Mediaocean both gave me some stats on this a couple months ago, whereas it is majority programmatic. A good portion of the programmatic is not biddable. It's like programmatic guaranteed.
Totally.
So that's an interesting distinction. Yes. Also, I want to bring up that Chris Kane, a friend of the pod, gave one of his amazing presentations at the IAB Tech Lab. And the one graph he showed that really I'd never seen before was that in the CTV world, there's now a proliferation of SSPs. Whereas if you went back a couple of years, many of the major media companies only use 1, 2, 3 partners to monetize their CTV, and that's exploded dramatically. It's 10, 15. And I think companies like Publica and SpringServe have a lot to do with that because they made it kind of easy to integrate new SSPs, whereas traditionally that wasn't the case. So QPS for CTV is skyrocketing, which is not always a good thing, but it's very noteworthy. And I'm sure if you ask Chris for a copy of that slide, he would provide it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. We'll go to the next hottest area of the space to round it out, and that's retail media. So it was actually 2 kind of cool announcements this week. We're major, but worth keeping on the radar. So the first is United Airlines launched their own version of an RMN. So they're going to be displaying personalized ads in the seatback screens, supposedly using some targeting to make it personalized to the passenger based on their home city, travel destination, so on and so forth. And then they're going to implement basically sort of still image or just graphical ads in between entertainment options when people are looking for a movie or something like that with an opt-out available. I think this is cool. If an airline can, provide some relevant ads and, get more, drive more profitability, subsidize the cost of tickets, which are skyrocketing. I think this is a win-win. What do you guys think?
Sign of things to come. I agree. I think that, which is why kind of the nomenclature and the kind of word that's kind of been used in the industry, it's always been retail media networks. I think that, it's hard to argue, is United Airlines a retailer? Maybe. But commerce media seems to be kind of more all-encompassing. You've got, banks that are getting in this business, insurance companies that are getting in this business. I think that everyone, this is, by the way, at the risk of stating the absolute obvious, this is tailor-made for IAB. So this is an industry that has no idea what it means to be a publisher, and no idea really what it means to be kind of in the advertising ecosystem, doesn't understand the ad stack, doesn't understand measurement, attribution, ad sizes, attribution, look back window. It's all kind of like the early 2000s, late 1990s in the internet space all over again. And we are working with lots and lots of RMNs and commerce players to kind of set standards. What is the look back window? What is the ad sizes you should be using? Which is really it's a great thing to see, because we're providing a great deal of value, because everyone is doing their own individual thing, and there is a need for some standardization.
Is United Airlines a member?
I don't think so, to be honest. Keeping track of who's a member when we have 720 is hard. I don't think they
All
are.
right, give them a call.
But they'll be on the list.
Smile and dial.
Yeah. So they're taking this seriously. They have a what seems to be a big presence at Cannes. I was invited to a couple of United Airlines events. So if this strike does not happen and I land successfully in Cannes, I will talk to whoever I can about the potential IAB opportunity and make some connections if possible, David. I'm your man on the street there.
Thank you.
Anyway, one more from a RMN perspective, and this is squarely in retailers. And again, I think this is cool. So Albertsons is opening up their ad space to non-endemics. They're partnering with a company called Rocked. Basically, it's once you complete a purchase on Albertsons digitally, they're going to serve an ad to a non-endemic. So I think it's neat. It's, opening up the aperture to, a highly intent-based audience, to new brands, sort of along the lines of what I think Cassidy is building at M3. I think it's kind of cool.
It ain't Wawa.
I'm waiting for the ads in the Wawa.
You haven't gotten them yet?
All summer I'm at Wawa. I'm waiting for the 728 by 90 equivalent. As I haven't seen too many yet.
Yeah, I want to see non-endemics work, but I don't think it's going to be as easy as just showing an ad. There's going to have to.
Why not?
Well, because the context of I just bought toothpaste, whatever is delivered, and then I see an insurance ad. It's an impression. It's an impression to a real human being, but there's something has to happen in terms of either the data and the targeting or the creative to make it work.
Okay. David, what do you think?
I'm not sure about that. I think the jury's still out. I think that there's possibility there. We're very close to the Albertsons folks. We work with them all the time, and we're hopeful that it works out.
I mean, just think about Amazon. Customers who purchase this also purchase this. Yeah. I think, all right, to your point, once there's enough data, and this is probably an opportunity for some company to really run with this and not, the individual retailers directly. I think there's an opportunity here.
That's kind of what I was saying is you have to work harder than just putting an ad there. And there needs to be some connection between the data about the user and what you're actually selling them and how you're merchandising it, et cetera. It's not like you bought toothpaste, so therefore you need home insurance. That doesn't make sense. There needs to be some way of doing it. Although maybe it does make sense. I don't know.
Maybe you do.
That stat that marketers would always say, which is like the number one time people change toothpaste brands is when they move houses. That was a stat that everyone said was based on one study.
Yeah, there's lots of those.
Yeah, and that's how the
correlations are not always obvious.
Right. That's how Move.com, which was a big advertiser, got started. They would just say that stat over and over again until you advertise.
I love that stuff. I eat that stuff up. I will believe it. I will start to parrot it across podcasts. I think that sort of kind of Seinfeld level information is so much fun. We just went through a lot. All right, you want to end it here?
Absolutely. There was a lot of other news, like Apple rebranding SCAD and Paramount going solo and things like that. But time is calling. So let's wrap this up. This is a great episode. David Cohen, the CEO of the IAB. Thanks for being here.
See ya.
Eric, always a pleasure.
Always.
Thank you for subscribing to Marketecture. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.